Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Be the Media. Tonight is Monday, October 28th, and my name is Jenny Lee, and I have with me Miss Dana.
Hi, guys.
And Miss Lisa, who is having some connectivity issues because she's in Pennsylvania. And tonight we have a special issue for you, a special interview. I'm so sorry. I got the issue and interview with Mr. Patrick Deegan. And Patrick Deegan is running for Huntington Town Council on the Libertarian line. Hello, Patrick.
That's Lisa.
No, it's you.
You can see me? Okay, I'm looking directly. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
I'm technical difficulties.
No, it's okay. So let me explain to you how it works. Whoever's voice it picks up, it will switch to your view in the camera.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation.
So if you can, well, you know what, this is a new program for you. You were just introduced to it tonight, so we don't expect that you should know it. We're still learning it. We've been using it for a while. So you're running for the Town of Huntington Town Council. If you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running.
I've been avoiding the question a lot lately because I don't have time, but I can answer that tonight. I'm a lifelong resident. I grew up here. My parents grew up here. My grandparents had moved out here generations ago. The other side of my family goes back even further. So we've seen most of the development. My parents and some of my relatives went to the Little Red Schoolhouse, the old schoolhouse, the first one in Elwood. It's a historic property right now. So we've got roots here, for lack of a better expression. I went to St. Anthony of Padua Elementary School, East Northport, which is now a Trinity Regional School, and I went to St. Anthony's High School in South Huntington. What else do you want to know about me locally, or?
Well, we'll totally get into the different topics, but what made you decide to run?
It's kind of been in my family to do community service, to be in part of civic groups, to firemen, law enforcement, military. When I was growing up, I always wanted to be in the military, and my grandmother kind of kept me out of it. Obviously, I wouldn't be a very good Marine, but her point was there was a higher form of service, since everybody in my family had served, that was representative government. And I kind of get chills saying that because they're all gone now.
Everyone.
But can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I think Jenny had a problem. What happened was I saw the community I grew up with and that I loved, that my grandparents kind of fought for, falling apart around me. I saw development. I'm not sure how to put a finger on it, but greed, for lack of a better expression, came in and took over our communities. It made our roads unsafe. It made our schools unsafe. It pushed people out because they couldn't afford to live here anymore. And time after time, I wound up having to step up for these community issues. So it got to the point where it was put your money where your mouth is, I guess you could say. And I couldn't just sit by and let everybody else have to lead as I helped and watch them suffer all the ridicule of what happens whenever a community member actually has to speak out against town hall. I mean, the old saying, you can't fight city hall. We found out we can, and we've won. So I figured my campaign was nothing more than a way of letting the average person, if you will, stand up, put the issues that represent the community and the people they know on the table, and not go the typical way of fundraising, special interests. You know, just no lawn signs, no flyers, no mailers, no things that most of us have come to hate over time. And I get to say the things most of the other candidates don't, because I don't have that major party line. It may discredit me from the major running, but let's be honest, there's no mailers about me. There's no smear campaigns. Nobody's going after my family. And I really appreciate that. I want to return to that. I don't know how things got so ugly and bitter in this town, especially having grown up and seeing what it was like to have just community members just doing the right thing time after time. I'm sorry, I don't want to overtalk your show, but please.
No, this is your interview.
That's
This is your interview.
You know, I live in I moved back to the neighborhood I grew up in. My mother moved into this house when I was a child because it was her best friend's house. I live across the street from where my grandparents lived. So when I say I've got roots here, I mean roots, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know, running around these yards for generations now.
so thick they're lifting up the sidewalks. So we know you a lot from Facebook. I know you from before, mostly from Facebook.
Yes.
But I ran into you during the Stop the Villadome Mall.
Yeah. The
So
thing pulled me out of the shadows, so to speak.
yeah, that's when you really started stepping up your game there.
I never wanted to go public with any of this. I recall what happened to you a couple years ago. You spoke out against the town and they came after you. And that's a normal thing that happens. So I guess I have a tough skin when it comes down to it. And although I hid behind other people, when Villadome came up, it was such a big monumental issue. I've been fighting it for so long. I knew so many details to it. I had no choice but to kind of step forward. And I'm going to use this opportunity. Andrew Kaplan, thank you for being that coat of armor for all of us, putting on the suit and speaking that absolute truth of the power. They needed that. And it was refreshing to hear that. So me stepping up in a way, I've even said this publicly many times, because a person like Andrew, as much as he would be the ideal candidate and representative of the people,
Right.
he couldn't run for one simple factor. We have a complete lack of civility in this town. And an honorable man of integrity cannot step up to that plate without being torn apart.
Not
You know,
that.
it's a tragedy,
It's
you know, and they don't recognize the scars that they leave, the emotional toll that this does on families. And, you know, it's disgusting. There's really no point in getting into it. Everybody knows how vile it is. We see it time and time again.
we see
And
what they're already doing to Sorrentino, and we, of course, the same old usual suspects are going around talking about Cook, and we're not seeing it as much against the girls. I don't know why. We saw a horrible campaign against Tracy, though. Tracy Edwards, when she ran, she was fair game. So
it's
how
I know each one of those people you mentioned personally because we live here. I spoke to every single one of them on the phone. They know my personal life. I know details about their personal lives because we're neighbors when it comes down to it.
Right.
You know, this party division that's literally ripped our neighborhoods apart. It got to me. You know, I couldn't handle it in that sense. So it's like, you know what? Let me step up and let me speak out. Let me be that voice that's kind of in the center, if you will. You know, the outspoken minority is the angry, get off my lawn contingency. Okay. They have no plans. They have no ideas to bring to the table. I think they just want to argue at the end of the day. You know, I think
they're just angry people.
Yeah. I mean, every name you mentioned, every candidate, whether or not it was the issue that they're pointing the finger at them for, they would have pulled something else out.
Right.
Whatever they think gets under the person's skin or might get some attention, they're going to do.
Oh, and they're not done yet. They'll go straight to
No, and we all know exactly the game plan they're going to use because we've seen it rolled out before. You know, I'm in a fortunate position by being this long shot underdog, where if they tried to do any smear to me, it would draw attention to me, and that would be their biggest problem. Because right now, I'm being excluded from certain process. I know all of you know this. Certain media publications are not even mentioning me. There's 4 candidates. Okay. One of them, I just had to say the other day, do I have to advertise for you to be mentioned as a candidate? The reply was, oh, here is a link if you would like to upload your information.
Quid pro quo. That's what they want.
I'm not advertising. I'm not kidding. I've spent no money. I refuse to take any money from my friends or neighbors or family. For what? Lawn signs? Mailers? Mailers get thrown out. I know what we do in my house. And the state ones, by the way, they stink. And I don't mean like in a production quality sense. The value of the ink, all right, it has to be the most toxic substance in the world. I touch it, my skin crawls, okay? I can't go near it. I don't want to bring it in the house because they smell so bad. And this is both state committees are doing this right now. So if they do an attack against me, I promise you, it's going to be as low budget, mass produced as possible because there's no integrity in this right now. You know, and I couldn't involve myself in that. Corporate contributions, I mean, can you have a sponsored candidate now? Is that legal yet? Or are they still working on that? I'm sorry, I don't get on a rant.
No, so, when people ask me to describe who you are, I always say that you're an environmentalist at heart, because all the conversations that I've had with you, you use all the big words that people don't understand that cause cancer and death and all those crazy things. So instead of us getting into the toxic chemicals in the water, how about we just go into a discussion about something really current and talk about what's going on at Northport middle school right now. I think that would be a nice segue.
All right. It's important to explain this. I'm not so much an environmentalist. It has to do, I think the conservatives actually years ago were the ones that coined certain phrases with environmentalists because the fiscal impacts. I'm what I would call a survivalist. Okay, so we need the environment to survive. We can't pollute our water and expect to survive. We can't cut down the trees, expect to breathe. Okay, and we can't overtoxify the soil and expect to grow food in it. So when you look at Northport Middle School, you're dealing with a culmination of all these potential things. So it's not even an environmental sense. There are sick kids. There's documented data that goes back to the 1960s, I believe it was, of cancer rates alone that are through the roof. My mother was a nurse. I showed her one of the plume data that I found digging around one night. It had to do with the Northport landfill. And it was a study that went between the 40s and the 80s, I believe. And the end result was 600 something men, 600 women. And just my own layman's term knowledge of cancer is usually men and women are affected differently in a certain demographic. So to have equal rates of these things and then to see the rates of affecting children. So a couple of years ago, because of the environmental issues, I was looking into what I would call the worst case scenario. And I had mentioned somewhere publicly, next step is people get sick, and somebody had said it's already started. And that's when somebody had pointed me in the direction of Northport Middle School and a school out in Brookhaven. Both of them are middle schools, and I don't know if it was because the land was cheap, but who puts a school next to a landfill? So if you want to call that environmentalism, yeah, I'm an environmentalist. And these are the things that made me run. It's not that I'm an environmentalist, it's that I'm a geek. I'm overly educated. And I've got the time to read this stuff and I can understand it. The hardest part for me when learning the water data was how to break the words down. First, I had to learn each one. Like it was a very humbling experience, you know, in my 40s to learn a new language that was English. But these issues really affect us all. And if we're not careful with what approach they take, we're going to see what we've seen only on an epidemic level. And I know cancer's affected just about everybody I know. Every pet we've had in the past 20 years has been lost to it. Tumors, bone marrow cancer. I mean, it's time we put the spotlight on it. We've been talking about this for decades. It's not the first time this conversation has come up. And the reason I got so silent and I'm having trouble looking at the camera is I read data from Senate and congressional reports. And what I found out is that they've known this and they've known for decades. It's just not public. So the questions back around 2001 was, with all the known contamination that took place from industrial discharge, from leaks, from spills, from misuse over the decades, from 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, there's industrial sites and industrial parks that are basically brownfield sites. And the idea of Superfund sites back in the 80s, we were like number 5 in the country for Superfund sites. And we haven't really seen much remediation. We've heard of Brookhaven and we've heard of Bethpage. Nobody's really heard of Hazeltine. And maybe this is the first time people out here are going to be hearing this. That's in my backyard. And they knew about that too. And these toxins in the water and in the ground get into the air and we breathe this. So I don't know, after hearing that, would you call me an environmentalist?
No, but that's how I describe you because you know a lot about the environmental issues.
Right. But
I want to give Lisa a chance to ask you a couple of questions because she has to leave in 15 minutes.
Sure.
Yes.
Sorry for talking.
No, it's okay, Patrick. What I really want to ask you about, I mean, you know, I have a lot in common with you, not as far as knowledge goes, but my passion about, you know, our filthy water, especially here in Huntington. But one question I really want to ask you is, what role should the town of Huntington play in keeping our water safe, from drinking, swimming, fishing, drinking, everything?
We can lead in that when it comes to a role. I don't think we should be following the way we have. As far as innovation goes, we've got Cold Spring Harbor, the laboratories over there. We have Fortune 500 company CEOs that live in Huntington. We've got a lot of PhDs here. So
A lot
if
of
we,
talk. There's a lot of talk, a lot of talk, a lot of talk.
there is a lot of talk, but we've never actually brought anything to the table. Do you understand? They usually do what, a fact-finding commission or a community relations group, or I mean, whatever new moniker they can come up with to call these things, but it never goes anywhere. We're at a critical point here where we can't just talk about it. Okay. When it comes to talk, the other talk I hear is, oh, we fixed it, we've taken money, and it's all better now. Well, if it's all better now, why is the discharge rate coming out of Northport wastewater plant still doing what it's doing? And all I keep hearing is, oh, it's fine. Well, if everything is fine, then why do the harbors keep being closed? Okay, so what can we do when it comes to that? I brought this to the table a while ago. There was a professor out of UConn that came up with, it wasn't his theory at first, but it's called phytoremediation. It's use of aquatic plants to clean up the water, because now this is crazy, everybody. Nitrogen is in the water and phosphorus because of fertilizer. If you put an aquatic plant in there, like a certain type of indigenous seaweed, it will grow very quickly and it will suck up the nitrogen. Okay. The argument then would be, well, what do we do with this seaweed? It's harvested and then can be sold on the open market as called biomass, biofuel. Okay. We don't use that here because Coventa, our power plant, has some kind of ridiculous agreement with us. We're dealing with outdated technologies. If we actually led in this, we could use the byproduct from our waste and actually convert it into energy. So like you said, it's all talk. It's because nobody will actually take the science and the data and lead with it. They have to wait for somebody else to tell them what to do. We have to wait for the county to say it's going to cost each of your residents $20,000 because you have to put in new septic treatment systems in each one of your homes because we screwed up way back before you even moved in and let everybody put in cesspools. And over the past 20 years, what have we seen? I can't even tell you how many probably billions of dollars we've seen in infrastructure upgrades for the water. Okay, so what can we do? We can actually lead this thing. We can stop piggybacking off of state regulations when it comes to discharge. We don't have to look at federal guidelines when it comes to chemicals that we allow in the water. And we can step up and actually put laws in effect that doesn't allow toxins and contaminants into our environment that can basically kill us off.
Lisa.
Yeah. The other thing, other than our poisoned water that we drink, that also tastes disgusting. What do you think's the most pressing issues in Huntington?
Like I said before, the civility factor. I've said this a couple times on stage. We've got people tearing us apart that have completely partisan issues. Okay. I don't know if they work for politics like it's a company, but they're driven that way. It's almost an obsessive compulsive disorder that steers people. And some of them do it just to get a rise out of people. Unless we can have some civility, we can't actually have discussion. Like I said before, there's a lot of talk. No, there's a lot of talk, but there's very rarely an agreement. You know, so it's usually one side pushing and saying, well, we're going to do this, even though we have the conversation, but no full consensus on this.
But how does the town play a role in making people, which we shouldn't be making people do anything, but.
All right. When it comes to the water, how does the town play a role? It's this 400-year-old history where the trustees of the town, which is another position I would inherit if I get elected to the town board, we have title over the waters and the lands. It's not typical to your constitutional rights over your property. Okay. We as trustees can put safeguards on that you've never heard of, because usually we've only used these rights for navigation. They tried to enforce it years ago when the DEC came in and tried to impose a fishing license. They said, no, you can't tell us what to do with our own waters. So when you look at the trustee rights of what you can do in health and safety, that's what I mean by lead in this. So what can a town do? Municipal incorporation, which is the town board, we're a little bit limited there. We can come up with funding and find grants and take advantage of grant programs. But as trustees, we can actually lead.
I mean, what are they in regards to civility? What would you expect that the town would do to step in to make people behave more civilly? I mean, that's not the role of government. You know what I mean?
Okay. Well, when we see our town board up there,
Mhm.
there's a lot of childish behavior. So in a sense of leading, that's how leading by behavior. I've made jokes before and I've argued, but I've noticed this over time. The people I've argued with are with, I'm not, I'm going to be blunt. They lie. And that kind of infuriates me. Like last week or 2 weeks ago, I said that there should be a moat at town hall with alligators in it, because that's how I feel about this. It's like storming the castle. When they look at us, they're like, oh, the peasants are here again, and they're trying to break in. That is not civility. When a constituent is talking to them about a serious pressing issue and they chuckle. Okay, one thing I've seen time and time again, and I want to point this out. Mrs. D'Amico has gone to that podium for the past several years whenever she can, talking about American disability compliance issues. And I see that board chuckle at times. Oh, here she comes. We have so many hot mic moments on that board. That alone, I mean, the contemptuous nature of that is what's driven it out in me when I address them. I know them. I speak to them civilly, personally, but what they've done to this community is created this combative situation. So that's something I believe I can lead with that, because I don't have to argue.
So leading by example.
Well, it's also ego. I don't know what the issue is with them at times. They feel very, very confronted by constituents at times, you know? There's no reason why they can't do the homework and do the research themselves. They wouldn't have to look as bad, but they don't need to make the person who's standing at the podium, who's putting their heart out there and embarrassed to be speaking in public, look any worse.
Mhm. As
Sorry.
well as the cutting down of time. I've seen that too, and that really infuriates
The
people. And
first
it's wrong. It's wrong.
First bell and then the cutting off of the mic. I mean, that's not.
I think that honestly, after the time is done, there's some people you just need to cut the mic off.
You
But-
do. It's a protocol.
It should. That's how it should happen. And we
Yeah.
should actually have one of the visual timers so that we know when to wrap it up ourselves. But they haven't done that. They got to ding this.
The meet the
bell.
count. There are people with cue cards. Oh,
Yeah.
30 seconds, 15 seconds.
Yeah. And then people.
The one
will
that's
fight.
I say, fire hose on. Your bell goes off, you don't want to move, put the fire hose on. Next.
I fear that. I fear that moment of running out of time, so to speak. So that's why I think I wrap it up quicker. And also, I've sat through these debates before, and it can get boring. There's no need to listen to somebody go up just to fill up time. So if you wrap it up, just be done with it.
Yeah. I just have one more quick question that's important to me, if you don't mind, since I do have to leave early. What are your plans, Patrick, to address the housing needs of all sectors of our community, including seniors and young people?
You cut out, you said housing needs of all sectors of our community, seniors and young people?
Yes, that's
Okay.
exactly.
I didn't know community because it all sector. Okay. All the housing that we're seeing right now is luxury apartments, and it's very high density. I had a conversation with somebody today about this. We've got a lot of properties that are becoming blighted. I've seen certain things happen with Habitat for Humanity. The veterans housing that we have right now, we've got 6 beds, and okay. We need to overhaul all of our perspective when it comes to housing in Huntington. We're pushing out entire demographics based on economics alone. So we don't just have a housing crisis for the elderly and the youth. We have it for the disabled, we have it for the veterans, and we have it for poor people as well. Okay. Huntington is for years been a not in my backyard kind of town. So right now we're hearing, well, we need housing for the youth and we need housing for the elderly. So we're seeing these 55 and over communities coming in, and that's supposed to satisfy the elderly. If you have $700,000, $800,000 to put into one of these units, and then to satisfy the youth in urban living, they're putting in apartments in Huntington Village, which start at what, $2,500 each. So we're not seeing anything that would be considered affordable, because the use of the word affordable has been considered over the past low income, and nobody wants to be considered low income or affordable. So they're creating what they call now workforce housing, which is nothing more than high density. So what my plan would be to look at the real estate market that we have, to actually do an inventory of the available properties that we have, and put that on the market as opposed to rebuilding anymore. Okay. We don't need to drive up the market, but as these properties get absorbed by larger commercial real estate holdings, they can sit on the property forever. And what we've seen over and over again is that blights our properties, drives property value down. So we shouldn't.
That reminds me of a question that I asked over at the Centerport Harbor Civic Association that night when I asked Joan Sergel, why are you so obsessed with building when we've got over 100 empty buildings right up and down New York Avenue, down one
I
town?
would like repurposing before I would like rebuilding. Okay. I mean, when it comes down to people always argue, oh, I don't want to see Queens. I want to see over urbanization. If we need to actually build housing, then we can look at retrofitting some of these buildings like what they did. I mean, open brick face sells pretty well. Okay. We don't need to break ground. But what we saw in Huntington Village was they do that under the theoretical aesthetic of going in and preserving history. They gut it and rebuild it. No parking. And ultimately it winds up taxing the entire community, whether it's the environment, just quality of life issues when it comes down to it. We don't need more people in a certain area. And then when they come in, they're not going to be happy with it either. Okay. So my question has ultimately been, who are we satisfying when we're building these apartments or these condo units? I don't think for residents.
Developer. Yeah, Lisa's right.
The developer, but who's moving in? Okay. I've heard, oh, well, my aunt lives there. Or, oh, I have a relative that moved in. Okay. But by and large, like that's not who's moving into 500 units. Otherwise there would be 500 houses available. So I'm convinced that they're probably marketing this to other areas where
they can move the developers Susie elsewhere. They don't need to build 100 units for Aunt Susan.
As much as I hear people saying they don't want it to become like Queens, people I hear moving into town recently are from Queens. The real estate is so high there, they'd rather move here and commute.
And we're pushing out generations of our own people.
Oh, completely.
Mm-hmm.
Not only generate, but if you lived in Huntington, it's like you might have to be part of this exodus you hear about.
Right.
Okay, but we're not looking at, well, where else on the island are we going to move? It's out of state now. But if you're looking at the commercial and residential real estate market in the city, it's economically reasonable to move out here and commute. So if you look at all the new hubs that they're putting up, the infrastructure improvements to the train, it used to go into the city. Now I think it's going to come out from the city. But to answer that question,
thank you very much, Patrick. I got to jump off, but thank you very much. I wish I had more time, but I'm on vacation. Sorry, but I will be back in time to vote.
And I give you a lot of credit. Thank you for showing up tonight. We're still, Dana and I are still in negotiations with what we're going to do on Wednesday, but thank you for making sure that you didn't miss the first part of that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I will talk to you guys soon. Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Figure out how to have fun.
Thanks.
I got her off.
Can we talk to Dana now?
Yeah, no, well, we wanted to let.
Okay, good. I didn't know if that was a screensaver.
No, what we did, we knew Lisa was.
I know, I forgot. I was going to say something before, and then I was like, oh, that's right. Lisa's got limited time. So.
And you actually got to see kind of how we do our background a little bit before we come on the show. So we do have like a basic format that we come through that, so you kind of know how we were trying to get it in to make it flow for how we were going to do it. So
I just didn't get to see the candidate presentation yet because I was so busy this past week.
Oh, okay.
I heard the controversy though, and the controversy was ridiculous. There's
silly stuff. So we did ask, we haven't gotten any questions, but we were late going on because I just got back from a long weekend with my marching band. So Miss Dina.
Yes.
I know you have some questions.
I just had a comment in regards to people saying they don't want to turn this into Queens or a little structure like that. We don't have the infrastructure to turn this into Queens. We don't have stores, we don't have public transportation. And the fact of the matter is, when they say affordable housing, what they do is they take the combined medium of the surrounding areas and then they deem that's affordable. Well, I don't know about you, but some of our areas that are surrounding us are well off.
Yeah.
So
well, that was the Harborfields Estates one when they did affordable housing.
One or two houses that were there that were affordable.
But what was the price?
It was ridiculous. The prices are expensive. Very
to buy a house.
Yeah, 5 and change, I think, or 6, something. I remember my mom looking at it, but it wasn't anything that I would jump to say it was affordable. The next thing, in regards to development, you have to be honest with yourself when we're asking about the people who are running our town. On town council, we have 3 members out of 5 that they own real estate. They invest. So their object is to build as much as possible. And they're capitalizing.
I've heard that, and over the past year, specifically, like more and more is being exposed with different connections on various boards that we have and developers. And I mean, I used to look at the campaign contribution list, and that used to paint the picture. Now you just need to look at, you know, what our boards are made up of at times, and
Yeah.
how
So-
it goes on after the county, from what I've seen. That can't work anymore. I mean, that's against our interests.
But until people start voting that way, it will be our interest. And in regards to civility, you know, we've had your town board members, town council members on mic saying, you got to shut this guy down as soon as he walks up. Or
Oh,
you
yeah.
have making faces or yawning. So you can't possibly expect the people that you're governing to be polite and courteous when you don't even bother to, you know, reciprocate that at all. The whole, I hate to say it, the whole behavior up there ever since the new direction took place is juvenile at best.
Yeah, the
And-
giggling. I mean, I can't believe giggling in public, like nobody sees them.
Not to mention, you know, when you are part of a team as such as town council is, you can disagree and chop each other off behind closed doors. But in public, you should have some form of unity. We all know that you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, but the way that they bicker amongst themselves, with the exception of Joan, because she's the only woman, at least we know they have some respect to her.
Are you talking about their executive meetings that they have, where apparently they don't resolve it and they air their dirty laundry in public every once in a
Well,
while?
I mean, you know, when you're in a position like that, you know, executive committee meetings or executive sessions can be heated. But my point is, you know, if you are going to carry on outside, how much respect do you think that I'm going to have for you if I see you sitting up there going back and forth with one another? I don't understand what exactly this new direction is supposed to be doing, but it's not doing what we want it to do. And in regards to how the town is being run, you have one member of town council that's up there. He believes in separating the population based off of income. So
Say that? Or is that just a...
no, it's a
I mean,
fact.
I've said stupid things before and been like, I'm sorry.
It's a fact. This particular person, well, Jenny, this particular person wanted to separate the Republican Party from those who live on Wall Street down as the Wall Street Republicans, and then the rest of us who were up this way as, you know, I guess the poor old good old Republicans. It's unfortunate, but that's who's running our town.
I'm laughing into my tissue.
Do you think, because you just mentioned that, except for Joan, probably because she's a woman, do you think it's because she's a woman? Because I've seen what they've done to Joanne Rea, and she was there a long time, and that's always bothered me.
Well, you know, if you look back at it, it's not everybody that's disrespectful to her. It's only Mark. And he's so arrogant and obnoxious that even though he has a wealth of information, you can't see it past the way he speaks to her. And it's blatant and it's rude. Not that she's a woman. Of course, she's an older woman.
She's very knowledgeable too.
You should have respect. Yeah, you should.
Institutional knowledge for 30-something years.
And she's not, I've dealt with her on many, many, many different levels. She's not the kind of person, even if she doesn't agree with you, that is going to be super aggressive. She's like your typical sweet aunt that comes with all the baked goods. That's how I see her. You know,
Let's say it. She is old school politics. She's old school. She really.
She is. So when I see,
and I think that's what it is. She sets the bar higher for them than they're willing to.
Patrick, you don't know how to wait your turn. You just be interrupting everybody, huh?
I'm sorry, Dana.
You have to learn to wait.
He gets excited.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
He gets
excited. Like, hold on. Wait a minute. I'm gonna forget what we're talking about.
Okay. So just so you know, we can see what's up here. The audience can't unless you're talking. So you can do this, which is what I did before, so that we know.
Oh.
Yeah, just trick.
Okay.
You told me something new.
Oh, we did.
I didn't know that, but okay.
Okay, now we know, so we get better.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't, he's just, I think I think they give her that respect because she's a woman. That's what I think. And I think Mark is just rude. Sorry.
No, I agree. With all due respect to Mark, I kind of shot him some daggers from the podium a couple of times when I've seen that. In fact, his behavior is what's driven me to the podium a couple of times, because he just becomes patronizing and demeaning at times, and that's no way to speak to a representative.
He's
Anybody.
No, do you remember when it was the two Marks up there, Mark Mayoka and Mark Cuthbertson? It was way before the New Direction was even there.
Mhm.
And we had Frank Petrone was there. It was truly, it was 10 times worse than it is now in regards to the level of disrespect. It really was. So it's not that it's gotten better. It's that the party has changed in a certain way. It's clearly it went from Democrat majority to a Republican majority, even though Gene's an independent, he's backed by the Republicans. But level of incivility is still there, and it just showed that it's coming from everybody. So I don't know how we can resolve that on our end. Yes, Patrick.
Do you know how many people have come up to me over time and said they don't want to speak because they feel like the board isn't listening to them and makes fun of them, and they feel embarrassed by actually going up? And that's embarrassing as a town, to know that we could have our representatives do that. I mean, they represent us in a larger sense. So, if you're just flipping through the channels and you see, cable access or public access, and you see our town board hearing, I hope they cut away and don't show our town board laughing at constituents. I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's true. No, when you said that part, I had to laugh. They don't cut away, so you can see it. And you're just like,
yeah. And the hot mics. I mean, the hot mic moments I've heard, it's, oh, you got to be kidding me.
We've covered them. We were like, it's just remarkable that these people know they're being recorded verbally. They know that they're being filmed, and there's still this, they don't even care. And they have that whole executive session to hash it out, and they still bring it out into the public venue.
It's funny to say this, but they're opponents, but Gene and Joan are, maybe because they're closer to Mrs. Rhea, have more respect when it comes down to it. It's like when you get to Chad and the other half of it, it's just, yeah, guys, I'm talking to you because I know you're going to see this, but we've spoke before. So you got to step it up, Mark, Ed, Nick, okay? I mean, Nick, no more bell. You took your bell away, and now you just have to turn the mic off, but that's because you're being a child with it. So, sorry, back to the show now.
You have to ask yourself this question, though. The people have voted Mark in how many times? Local elections is where the people have the most votes, and we have really the most power. So we can't all blame it on him, because he keeps getting in. And it's not like he just magically showed up. And every time he runs, he's successful. So what does that say about the people of the town? That we don't care.
No, I think I know what Patrick's going to say, but he wanted to answer.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say is the people don't know. We've been to town board hearings, we've been to the meetings, we've been to a lot of it over the years even. It's the same faces over and over again. Okay, most people don't watch the public access channel. They're not going to look up on town hall. They go down there. How many people have you seen come down and speak, and that's the first time they've ever really been there and didn't even know any of this process took place until something that the town was doing affected them?
That's true.
And wait do you see, it's true, that's true. It's not in their backyard. Wait do you see in 8 days after the election? I think we're going to bring the results in live for everyone. That's one of the reasons why we started the show, is because people weren't engaged in their government, and they're also not willing to sit through a 5-6 hour town board meeting. How would you suggest getting those cut down time-wise?
Well, they got to go back to 2 meetings a month. This is absurd. They go back to 2 meetings a month. I mean, they figure out the schedule, not this round robin of daytime, nighttime like they did. There was no real rhyme or reason to it. And then the other thing that's a problem is they have to separate the proclamations and awards they give out from taking an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, on top of a 4-hour meeting. Okay. So if you figure this out, the argument was they can get everything wrapped up once a month. Okay. And then at the same time that took place, they were arguing over cutbacks and budget problems. Well, if you look at two 2-hour meetings compared to one 4-hour meeting, it kind of works out to the same math to me. It's 4 hours in total. But when you cram 4 hours in, they can sit there as their legislative duty once a month, sit there for 4 hours and entertain us like it's court. But what does it force us to do? How many people want to sit there for 3 hours waiting to speak and not knowing when their turn is going to come? We saw that with the Villadome debate. It was 100 speakers just at that one time, and it went on for hours. That not properly vetting that project with the community cost the town an entire evening of meeting issues. And now that we've cut down to once a month for 4 hours, what was the last one? 4.5 hours?
But there was also 108 items on the agenda. So it also boils down to them doing a little bit too much.
Well, too much. Is it too much, or is it, how can we keep up with it when it's just a single sentence to describe it? I mean, well, we're given the opportunity, supposedly everything is a matter of record, but we've foiled things time and time again, only to be told, oh, you can have it next week when the hearing is the next day. And that's not transparency.
I don't think this particular administration is known for transparency. That's just my observation. In regards to the town hall meetings, unfortunately, they needed to have that bell. People were out of control. No one was listening, and they couldn't understand. They couldn't separate Chad, the local friendly guy, and our local assemblyman, to now the supervisor, and they took advantage of that. So Nick had no choice but to, when we went there, I mean, there would be people speaking all out. It was a circus. It was a complete circus. And unfortunately, as someone who that is a parliamentarian for an organization, and I conduct some Meet the Candidates, you have to be able to shut people up quickly and politely, because they will continue on. If you have 3 minutes and we have 108 people to speak, I need you to stop at 3 minutes. I don't need you to go over, because I don't want to be here until tomorrow. So, I mean, be realistic in that aspect, because how would they control it if he didn't?
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Patrick.
I agree with you in having structure to it, but you have to remember this administration also came in with the promises of possibly increasing speaking time. So if we could increase the speaking time and also potentially yield floor time, because I know I've sat in a room before and there are people that could speak for 15 minutes and should be able to speak for 15 minutes, and having to juggle between who's going to say what.
I don't know if you would get a lot of people that would agree with sitting down for 15 minutes.
Oh, no. I apologize. That's not what I meant.
Okay.
I said in a sense of yielding floor time.
Oh, okay.
Like what I did when I yielded my floor time for the other speaker at the planning board meeting, and instead of just giving him my time, which is completely legal, they went back and forth over it, which ended up wasting more time than if they just would have allowed the speaker to take my 30 seconds to finish what he was saying. It goes back to the disrespect factor that we've been talking about.
Yeah, you said, parliamentary procedure, certain rules and how we go about this. They're allowed to yield floor time. They're allowed to retain floor time. We can't. I mean, we're treated like children when it comes down to it. It's like, okay, you get your 3 minutes, and if you're done, you're going to get belled out or cut off, because some people don't know how to conduct themselves in public. But what I meant by maybe 4 minutes, even, okay, if I only need a minute to speak and I know that somebody else has a bulk of information, that's the public hearing. Sometimes you can't get all that information out in 3 minutes is the absolute facts to it.
Sorry. I want to delve in because I know that this subject matter is very close to your heart. And I also know about the separations of powers of town versus federal, state, all those other things. So what would you as a town board member do to help fix the pending 5G situation in the town, since it looks like it's going to be a federal requirement? So we will be mandated to accept it. So what do you feel is going to be the fix on this, and why do you feel 5G is such a problem?
If I'm on the town board, I don't know if I'm allowed to speak about the health possibilities of what 5G can do. So I'm not on the town board right now, though. So
Yes.
there's an argument of ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. I looked into some of the science of what it'll actually do to water molecules. Okay, we put these things on our water towers. We put them up in our neighborhoods. They're in such close proximity that the EMF field that's being created, when it links up to its, when you created this electromagnetic field to allow for the possibility of 5G to operate, you don't know what's going to happen to the community. So the FCC has kind of backed us into this corner because of certain people lobbying them. What we're giving away is our public rights away, essentially. We've got very limited bargaining power with that right now. So what I would do to actually be able to curtail it a little bit would be apply a trustee loophole, which is the fact that we technically would have air rights because the air rights are connected to the land rights. So although the 5G might be under the FCC regulations, nobody's actually tried this yet. I've looked at all the trustee angles before, and they've mostly been, like I said earlier, have been applied to water and navigation rights. But it also comes to land, fishing, fowling, hunting. We've only used them a couple of different times. This might be one of those reasons to actually pull out this 400-year-old charter that, with all due respect, is completely legally binding to this day. So that's the only way to possibly get our rights back on this.
I want to give you a moment to explain that, because that's something that you've talked to me a lot of times about. And in the few minutes that remain, I want you to be able to explain to people the difference between why they close the meetings and go into a trustees meeting,
Okay.
Versus how they function as a town board, because I think that that's very important information to get out to the community.
It's complicated because most people understand the town government, the way it works, how they see it. If everybody recalls, the town has a incorporation date of 1653, not a founding date. Okay, the town history is in 1653, 3 men came from Oyster Bay, traded with Matinecock for land, and then immediately took that title and transferred it over to some settlers that had already been there. All right, that's really important because when the first English settlers came here, they made some deals with the Dutch, or they didn't, but they traded with the natives for land. Those contracts, through changing hands of the country, if you will, New Amsterdam to New York, that caused major repercussions in the town of Huntington. We rewrote rules. We had to get a new charter. Our charters came from the King of England. We had title to anything we wanted here except for gold and silver. But in that charter, it even gave us the right to create our own government. Now, this is important because if you look at how the Constitution was founded, this is the precursor to that. So when you hear about Huntington having its own police department, we were allowed to do that because of these charter rights, maritime and things like that. We have charter right to our waters. It's not through New York State. It's through these original titles. Now, it's important because that's how the town began. And then they created a town board. Town board is middle management, essentially. So if you're looking at what the duties and obligations are that actually matter most to the people in the town, the residents, you're dealing with trustee issues. When you're dealing with the day-to-day business and operations of the municipal incorporation, then it's the town board. And then from the town board, you're dealing with the community development agency, the economic development corporation, and then all the other little nonprofit groups that the town has that's supposed to satisfy the needs of the residents. So if you look at it from that perspective, we should be perfect, right? We've got everything we could possibly need. But they've been overlooking this trustee angle for over 100 years now.
So we could literally function outside of the normal course of New York State laws because of this original treaty that was traded in 1653 with the Matinecock tribe.
Yes and no. We would have to do it as residents and the citizens, because the residents of the town are also included in this title. The trustees are, the residents are included in this. So what happens right now is the town board and the trustees are the same office, if you will. They disbanded the office of the trustees in the 1800s. they created the town of Babylon. All of our records were shared within the towns, and then they started dividing up trustee titles. Okay. The only people that really know this is some of the founding families that are still here, by the way. And that's their family history.
And how does this legally serve the residents of the town?
Because they've actually found, I mean, trust, I wish Lisa was here because she actually knows this too. Constitutionally speaking, treaties are binding.
Right.
So if you have a treaty from 400 years ago, it's upheld today.
Correct.
And if you look at recent court cases, even up until this millennium, you're going to see that the argument over whether or not the trustees have title to certain issues mentioned in the patents, the trustees do, without question. Okay. We don't ever hear about that. Anytime I mention it to any of the board members, I've even had to ask them, did anybody brief you on this? So there's no crash course in this because it's all municipal law as far as they're concerned. Nobody's read the duties and obligations of the trustees, of the freeholders, of the commonality of the Township of Huntington. I did.
Of course you did. Of course.
Well, it was there.
Required to read that? Are they required to read it?
When you're considering a lawsuit,
I wouldn't know. Sorry, I wouldn't know until I'm sworn in. Remember when Chad was sworn in and he was a little surprised, supposedly, about being given these different titles? One was the trustee title.
That's that chain that they bring out.
Oh,
The blue and the gold and that kingy thingy.
I know what you're talking about. I know.
Yep. Because
I'm sure Mrs. Rhea knows some of these things.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
She's been deep with the archives. You know, she knows about the charter. She's very proud of the charter we have. But there's a long sordid history of that. And our town's founding from 1653 on was a lot of legal action, arguments over title of land. Then when you get to the Revolutionary War, certain families were stealing land from other families. That was the Loyalist Patriot thing.
That's why it would behoove some people who are currently having some of these land use issues that are preparing their Article 78s for lawsuit. They need to not just name the town of Huntington, they also need to name the town trustees, because the trustees were originally interested with the land. Their job was to divvy it up. It wasn't to, give it to do the other thing. So it's important, and it kind of helps give your law sort more oomph. So thank you for going over that. So you have about 7 minutes left. What did we not cover that you want to make sure is covered as to why people should give you their vote?
Okay, I had mentioned that ADA compliance. Overdevelopment, I'll stand up against. Okay, I've done that already. Parking and traffic, we need solutions to that. That's very simple by looking at some design plans that other cities and other municipalities have had to employ to overcome the problems that we're facing. We have to deal with nepotism and cronyism. All right, this pay-to-play politics we're seeing, where we don't know who is not related to whom.
Dana's big on that. Dana hates that.
Come on, 209,000 people, 208,000 people in the town, and it's the same 100 players over and over and over again.
Yep.
And when it comes to some of the larger representatives, if you will, they're going from county to county, town to town.
It's even getting in our schools now. It's getting in our schools, and that's where I really don't like it. I actually had an incident today, not to cut you off, I'm sorry, because I tried not to.
Do you mean the school board, the pay-to-play thing, or what was getting into?
It's just too many relatives. It's just too, okay, so if you have someone in your school district that is a teacher or some type of whatever, or you have political connections, it gets very slippery. And I'm in school district 13, and I can tell you today, I went to Maplewood to pick up my son from intramurals, and you're not supposed to pick, let me not give it away because then they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But, it's annoying because it's the nepotism that's in there that allows these people to do what they have to do. Like, your child gets to go before everybody else's child because you are related to who? Or who? I can't stand that. It's very, very, very aggravating. And when politics starts coming into education, I have an issue. And that's what we're starting to see. It's just too many people interlocked.
And do you notice they defend each other by not getting involved too? So people talk about taxes. It's like, well, it's a school district tax, but They don't talk about that. The other side, it's like, so like we were talking about Northport Middle School before. From the town perspective, it's, oh, well, that's a school district issue.
Yeah.
Like, really, it's not affecting the town. It's not affecting the residents, you know? We hear that from the county representatives all the time. It's like them releasing themselves alive.
There is a legal jurisdiction. You know this. There is one because and they do that by design to keep us not uninvolved, but unable to navigate the chain of command.
I learned something very interesting though. Lawyers became representatives to the point where so heavily that once they got into office, they wrote code as they would want to see as a lawyer. So we've got so many loopholes now because they've created it this way. So over the years, it was set up against us, you know what I mean? Where they could use a loophole and just overturn the whole thing. But now one law supersedes the other. Okay, another one cancels it out. If you look 5 paragraphs deep on the 5th page of one law, it nullifies something else completely. And they never actually went through and edited the whole thing in recent times. It's like a living document, as we hear all the time. It's a living document, whether they're kind of like making it up as they go along. But if you actually look at the law and the statutes and the precedent that's out there, a lot of times you'll find out that they're not doing what's within the law.
That's scary. That's a little scary. I'm sorry.
You've seen it, you know it. You know?
No, it is. One thing I'll say about you, even the first time I saw you speak at the Meet the Candidates night, everyone was impressed by what you had to say. I was hella impressed because it was your first time and you held your own. You touch on topics that people are generally afraid to even discuss. So that's a breath, a breath of fresh air. You don't hold back and you say what's out there. So when you say things, sometimes for some of us, we know these things, but we keep it in the back of our mind like, oh, it's there, but we're not going to really acknowledge it. But when you bring it up, we don't have a choice but to say, he has a point.
When I was a kid, if somebody was speeding down the block and there were kids playing, every adult would come out, okay, and charge the car screaming, okay? Maybe even yank the driver out and chastise them publicly, going, what are you doing? There are children here. You don't do that. Now, that car would zip by and people go, oh, that's not right.
Yes.
They'll complain for a day later. Oh, you should have seen. Oh, they'll go to town hall and complain about the people speeding down their block wanting a stop sign put in. Okay? And they won't even pay attention that the person next to them speaking next is saying, everybody's speeding through the stop sign that we put in the block. It's not the answers we need.
It's true.
That's true. Very true.
Totally true. All right, Dana, do you have any final questions?
I do not. It was a great, interview. My battery weren't dead. So I'm trying to keep it up. But I think it was a great interview. I wish you the best of luck. I think you have a lot to offer. And keep giving them hell.
Apparently I am. That's how they view me, apparently. It's funny when you speak out and stand up with other people. It's called giving them hell.
Oh, yeah. Well, they have interesting names for all of us. So join the club.
That's right.
Welcome to the club. Well, Patrick, stay right there. I know that you're new to this format, but I'll let you know when. But we hope everyone enjoyed tonight's Huntington View. Have a good night, everyone. Say good evening.
Bye, guys.
Good evening.